What if everything you've been taught about the birth of Jesus was only half the story? What if the nativity scene you've celebrated every December, the baby in the manger, the Virgin Mother, the guiding star, wasn't just a historical event from 2,000 years ago, but a living blueprint meant to transform your life right now today? For most of us, Christmas has become a beautiful tradition. We gather around nativity scenes, sing carols about that silent night in Bethlehem, and celebrate what we believe happened once long ago in a distant land. But here's what might startle you. Smith Wigglesworth, one of the most powerful spiritual teachers in history, taught that when we approach the birth of Jesus as merely a past event to commemorate, we miss the entire point. We're standing at the door of transformation but never stepping through. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Think about it for a moment. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed, you've believed, you've done everything your faith tradition taught you to do, yet something still feels missing. There's a gap between the spiritual promises you've heard and the reality you're experiencing. You know the Christmas story by heart, but it remains somehow external to your daily struggles, your anxieties, your search for meaning and purpose. What Wigglesworth discovered, and what he spent his life teaching, is that the virgin birth isn't about defending a biological impossibility or proving a theological point. The virgin birth is the key to understanding how divine consciousness enters human experience. When the Gospel speaks of Mary conceiving without human intervention, it's revealing something far more profound than a one-time miracle. It's describing the exact spiritual mechanism through which God's presence births itself in ordinary human awareness. Stay with me here, because this is where it gets truly transformative. The virginity that Mary represents isn't about biology at all. It's about consciousness that has become empty of human manipulation, untouched by personal agenda, free from the constant scheming and controlling that defines how most of us try to live our lives. What you're about to discover might surprise you. This same virginal consciousness, this same receptive, surrendered state, is what allows Christ to be born not just in Mary 2,000 years ago, but in you, right now. For centuries, religious tradition has taught us to admire Mary, to venerate her, to celebrate what happened to her. But Wigglesworth understood that Mary wasn't meant to be an exception we worship from a distance. She was meant to be a pattern we follow, a demonstration of what becomes possible when human consciousness releases control and becomes receptive to divine conception. This isn't metaphor. This isn't symbolism. This is the actual spiritual technology embedded in the nativity story, waiting for those who have eyes to see it. And when you understand this, when you truly grasp what the virgin birth is revealing about your own potential for transformation, everything changes. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what I'm about to share completely transforms how you read every word of the nativity story. When Wigglesworth spoke about Christ, he wasn't primarily talking about a person who lived 2,000 years ago. He was talking about a state of consciousness, God's presence made visible, tangible, active in human awareness. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. Think about how we've been conditioned to understand this story. We've been taught that Jesus was special, unique, the one and only Son of God, and therefore what happened to him could never happen to us. But here's the radical shift in mindset that Wigglesworth brought. The birth narrative isn't asking you to admire someone else's experience. It's giving you precise instructions for your own spiritual awakening, for your own journey into divine consciousness. Every element of the story carries coded meaning. The manger isn't just a feeding trough where a baby happened to be laid. The shepherds aren't random witnesses. The star isn't merely a celestial phenomenon. These are all descriptions of internal spiritual realities, revelations about how consciousness shifts from purely human awareness to something that includes the divine dimension. When you start seeing these details not as decorative elements for Christmas cards, but as a mystical map, the entire narrative comes alive with personal relevance. Here's where it gets intensely practical. Mary represents something that must happen inside you before any spiritual transformation can occur. She symbolizes consciousness in its receptive virginal state, and I need you to really understand what virginal means in this context. It's not about purity in a moral sense. It's about emptiness of personal agenda. It's about a consciousness that has stopped scheming, stopped manipulating, stopped trying to force outcomes through sheer human willpower. If this resonated with you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I dive deep into these mystical truths that most spiritual teachings never touch, and I'd love to have you as part of this journey of genuine transformation. Most of us approach God, approach spirituality, approach life itself with a consciousness that's already full of our plans, our expectations, our demands about how things should unfold. We come to prayer with a shopping list. We come to meditation with an agenda. We come to the divine with our minds already made up about what we need and how we should get it. This is the opposite of virginal consciousness. This is a womb, already crowded, already occupied, already controlled by human ambition. But transformation, real transformation, requires something radically different. It requires the courage to become empty, to release control, to stop manipulating outcomes. Your awareness must achieve this quality of openness and surrender, becoming a space where divine consciousness can conceive itself without interference. This is what Mary demonstrates. She didn't negotiate with the angel. She didn't present her 5-year plan and ask how this fit into it. She simply said, "Let it be done to me according to your word." That's virginal consciousness. That's the receptive state where the divine can enter. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to release control," if this resonates with where you are on your journey right now. But here's something fascinating that most people completely overlook when they read the nativity story. Who were the first people to receive the announcement of this birth? Not the religious leaders, not the scholars studying sacred texts in the temple, not the priests performing elaborate rituals. It was shepherds, ordinary working people out in the fields, watching their flocks by night. And there's profound wisdom encoded in this detail about who gets to witness transformation firsthand. The shepherds represent a state of consciousness that's absolutely essential for spiritual awakening. They were in the field, not the temple. They were in quiet awareness, not religious performance. They weren't trying to make something happen through elaborate spiritual techniques or impressive theological knowledge. They were simply alert, present, open to whatever might unfold in the ordinariness of their night watch. This is the mindset that receives divine revelation, not the mind that's striving and performing, but the mind that's quietly attentive. Most of us have been taught that spiritual breakthrough requires more effort, more study, more ritual, more religious activity. We think transformation happens when we finally master the right prayers, attend the right services, read the right number of scripture passages. But the shepherds reveal a completely different truth. Christ consciousness doesn't emerge through religious performance. It emerges in the receptive awareness of ordinary moments when your mind is alert yet peaceful, when you're simply present without agenda. This brings us to one of the most powerful symbols in the entire story, and it's something we often rush past without understanding its deeper impact on our spiritual journey. Mary and Joseph found no room in the inn. On the surface, this seems like an unfortunate logistical problem, a minor difficulty in the story's setting. But Wigglesworth understood that the crowded inn represents something we all struggle with every single day: the cluttered human mind. Think about your own mental state right now, in this very moment. How many thoughts are competing for attention? How many worries about tomorrow, regrets about yesterday, plans that need managing, problems that need solving, decisions that need making? The average human mind is like that inn, completely full, every room occupied, no space available for anything new. We're crowded with concerns, packed with plans, overflowing with constant mental activity. And here's the revelation that changes everything. Christ consciousness cannot be born in that crowded mental space. It's not that God is withholding something from you. It's that there's simply no room for the divine to enter when your awareness is already stuffed full of human reasoning and relentless control. The birth requires what the story shows us, the humble stable of a quiet, surrendered mind. The stable wasn't glamorous. It wasn't prestigious. It wasn't what anyone would have chosen as the ideal location for such a momentous event. But it had one essential quality that the inn lacked. It had space. It was empty. And in that emptiness, in that humble simplicity, the most profound transformation in human history could unfold. Your mind needs to become that stable, not through adding more spiritual practices or accumulating more knowledge, but through releasing the grip of constant mental noise and creating space for something beyond human understanding to emerge. Drop a comment saying, "I'm creating space," if you're recognizing where your own inner inn might be too crowded right now. Let me show you what this actually looks like in practice, because spiritual virginity is one of those concepts that sounds mystical until you understand what it truly means for your daily decisions and your approach to life. When Wigglesworth talked about virginity in this context, he was describing consciousness that remains untouched by human manipulation, planning, or willful effort. It's the opposite of how most of us have been trained to operate. We live in a culture that celebrates control. We're taught to make things happen, to force outcomes through personal power, to strategize and scheme until we get what we want. We bring this same mindset into our spiritual lives, approaching God like a business transaction or a strategic partnership. We pray with agendas. We meditate with expectations. We perform spiritual practices as techniques to manipulate reality into compliance with our desires. But this is the very thing that blocks divine conception. True spiritual virginity means coming to a place where you stop trying to make things happen through sheer personal will. It's releasing the death grip of control and allowing yourself to become empty of your own clever plans and manipulations. This feels terrifying to the human ego because it looks like giving up, like becoming passive or irresponsible. But it's actually the most powerful position you can take. This emptiness, this spiritual virginity, becomes the womb where divine consciousness can conceive itself without human interference constantly getting in the way. Here's the paradox that takes most people years to understand. The moment you stop trying to force transformation is often the exact moment transformation becomes possible. When you release your agenda about how your healing should happen, healing finds a way. When you stop manipulating circumstances to create the outcome you've decided is necessary, better outcomes you couldn't have imagined begin to emerge. This isn't passivity, it's profound trust in a wisdom that surpasses human calculation. And this brings us to another element of the story that reveals how you navigate this journey of transformation. The wise men followed a star, not a map, not directions from religious authorities, not a systematic plan they devised through careful study. They followed an inner light, a guiding presence that pulled them towards something they couldn't fully explain or justify through logic alone. Wigglesworth understood that the star represents your own spiritual intuition, that inner knowing that operates beyond rational thought. True spiritual guidance never comes solely from external authorities telling you what to believe or religious institutions dictating your path. It comes from that subtle inner compass, that quiet certainty that draws you toward truth even when everyone around you thinks you're making a mistake, even when you cannot logically defend your decisions. How many times have you felt that pull, that inner knowing, but ignored it because it didn't make sense to your rational mind? How often have you dismissed your spiritual intuition because it contradicted what the authorities in your life were telling you? The wise men teach us something crucial. Following the inner star requires courage to trust what you know in ways that transcend intellectual understanding. It requires willingness to look foolish, to journey into unknown territory guided only by that subtle light of divine knowing that shines within your own consciousness. Comment below. I'm following my inner star. If you've ever felt that inexplicable pull toward a truth you couldn't rationally defend. What I'm about to share is the difference between religion and transformation, between believing a story and experiencing a reality. And this is where so many people get stuck for decades, sitting in churches, reading scriptures, celebrating traditions, yet never quite touching the actual power they're seeking. Here's the truth that Wigglesworth spent his life demonstrating. Jesus' birth must happen in you, not just be believed by you. This isn't a small distinction. This is everything. You can believe the Christmas story with absolute conviction. You can defend its historical accuracy, memorize every detail, celebrate it with sincere devotion year after year. But until Christ consciousness is actually born in your awareness, until it transforms how you perceive reality, until it empowers you to live from divine rather than human consciousness, the entire narrative remains external to you. It's a beautiful myth and inspiring tale, but it has no personal power in your actual daily experience. If this opened your eyes to something you'd never seen before in the Christmas story, show some love by hitting that like button. It genuinely helps this message find others who are searching for deeper truth. The shift from believing about something to experiencing it within yourself is the journey every genuine spiritual seeker must eventually take. It's the difference between admiring light from a distance and becoming a source of light yourself. And this journey begins the moment you understand that everything the nativity story describes is meant to unfold in the landscape of your own consciousness right now, not just in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. So how does this birth actually happen? What does it look like in practical terms when you move from external belief to internal experience? Wigglesworth was clear about this. Practicing inner virginity, that receptive, surrendered state we've been exploring, requires a fundamental shift in how you approach each day, each decision, each moment of your waking life. Most of us start our mornings with our minds already racing. Before our feet hit the floor, we're compiling mental lists of problems to solve, battles to fight, obstacles to overcome. We approach our day like a military campaign that needs to be strategically planned and forcefully executed. We bring this same energy to our spiritual practice. Here's my list of prayer requests. Here's what I need God to do for me today. Here's how I think things should unfold. Every bit of this is human consciousness trying to control outcomes through willpower and manipulation. But what if you began your day completely differently? What if, instead of launching immediately into planning and scheming mode, you started with complete receptivity? No prayers asking for things. No affirmations trying to program reality. No mental rehearsal of how you'll handle anticipated challenges. Just quiet openness like Mary's womb before conception. Empty, available, trusting. This requires a radical departure from how you've been conditioned to operate. You stop trying to conceive your day through frantic human planning. You stop approaching life as something you must force into submission through personal effort. Instead, you become still. You become receptive. You create space for divine consciousness to emerge and guide you from within, rather than constantly imposing your agenda from without. The impact of this shift cannot be overstated. When you release the compulsion to control everything, when you stop operating from pure human reasoning and calculation, you create the conditions for something extraordinary to be born in your awareness. Ideas come that you didn't think up. Solutions appear that bypass all your clever strategizing. A quality of peace settles into your experience that has nothing to do with external circumstances being perfectly arranged. Write "I'm practicing receptivity" in the comments if you're willing to start your tomorrow differently than you started today. There's another layer to this that completely transforms how you experience difficulties and challenges in your life. It's a practice Wigglesworth taught called impersonalization, and when you understand it, you stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a witness to transformation. Here's what this means in real terms. Most of us take everything that happens to us personally. When problems arise, we immediately interpret them as evidence that something is wrong with us, that we're being punished, that we've failed spiritually somehow. You face financial pressure and think, I must not have enough faith. You experience health challenges and assume, God is displeased with me. You encounter relationship conflict and conclude, I'm spiritually defective. This personalization of challenges creates an enormous emotional burden that actually blocks the very transformation you're seeking. But what if your difficulties aren't personal at all? What if they're simply the natural state of human consciousness, operating without the Christ birth within? This isn't minimizing your struggles or dismissing your pain. It's recognizing that challenges are how awareness functions when it's still running purely on human resources, human understanding, human power. When you stop making problems personal, when you stop seeing them as evidence of your unworthiness or spiritual inadequacy, something remarkable happens. You achieve a kind of detachment that paradoxically creates deeper receptivity. This detachment isn't cold or uncaring. It's the freedom to observe what's happening without the crushing weight of personal shame or self-condemnation. It's recognizing that the anxiety you feel, the fear that grips you, the confusion that overwhelms you, these aren't signs of your failure. They're simply the default setting of consciousness that hasn't yet experienced divine birth. And in that recognition, in that release from taking everything personally, you create space for something beyond human understanding to emerge and transform your situation from the inside out. This brings us directly to how you cultivate the inner environment where this birth can occur, and it requires completely reversing how most people approach prayer and spiritual practice. Think about your own prayer life for a moment. What does it typically look like? If you're honest, most prayer involves you speaking to God, making requests, stating needs, listing problems that need solving, asking for interventions in specific situations. It's humanity broadcasting demands and expectations upward, hoping for divine response. But Wigglesworth understood that the consciousness that actually births Christ operates in the opposite direction. It's not you speaking to God. It's God speaking to you. It's not you telling the divine what you need. It's the divine revealing what you cannot see on your own. This requires a completely different approach to meditation and prayer, one based on silent receptivity rather than vocal petition. Real meditation, the kind that creates space for divine conception, means sitting in silence and listening for the still small voice of divine intelligence, rather than filling every moment with your own words and thoughts and requests. This feels strange at first, maybe even wasteful. Your mind wants to be productive, to use prayer time efficiently by getting through your entire list of concerns. But that very productivity mindset is what keeps your consciousness crowded, unable to receive what wants to be born. When you sit in genuine silence, when you resist the urge to fill the space with your agenda, when you simply listen with your whole being, divine ideas begin conceiving themselves in the quiet womb of your awareness. These aren't thoughts you manufactured, or strategies you cleverly devised. They're revelations that emerge from a source beyond your personal intellect. Type, I'm learning to listen below if you're recognizing how much of your spiritual practice has been speaking instead of receiving. There's a profound shift that happens when you move from petition to recognition, and it's one of the most powerful secrets Wigglesworth ever taught. Instead of approaching your circumstances with prayers that essentially say, God, please change this situation, because it's not what I want, you begin practicing recognition of the divine presence already operating within that very situation. This sounds subtle, but the impact on your consciousness is absolutely massive. Recognition is the spiritual equivalent of Mary's response when the angel announced what would happen to her. She didn't negotiate. She didn't present counter-proposals. She didn't ask for the circumstances to be different. She simply said, let it be done unto me according to your word. That's the posture of recognition, acknowledging divine presence and activity, Even when your human eyes can't see how this could possibly work out. Even when logic screams that your situation is impossible. When you practice recognition instead of petition, you shift from a consciousness of lack and need to a consciousness of divine presence. You stop approaching God as a beggar desperate for help and start resting as someone in whom Christ can actually be conceived. This isn't about denying real problems or pretending difficulties don't exist. It's about recognizing a greater reality operating beneath the surface of what your physical senses report. Here's what this looks like practically. You're facing financial pressure that feels overwhelming. Instead of spending your meditation time begging God to send money or fix your situation, you practice recognition. Divine presence is here right now. Regardless of what my bank account shows, infinite intelligence is operating in this situation. I may not see how, but I recognize that God's provision is already moving in ways my limited human perception cannot detect. You're not demanding change. You're acknowledging a reality that transcends current appearances. And this is where something truly remarkable begins to unfold. Something that catches most people completely by surprise when they first experience it. When divine consciousness starts to be conceived in your awareness through these practices of receptivity, listening, and recognition, the first thing that changes is not your circumstances. It's your perception. You begin perceiving a spiritual reality that runs parallel to the material world, a dimension of existence that was always there, but that you simply couldn't see before. Your job situation might not change overnight, but suddenly that unbearable work environment becomes manageable. The tasks are the same, the people are the same, but your experience of it all shifts because you're perceiving from a different level of consciousness. That relationship that seemed completely hopeless begins revealing new possibilities you couldn't see when you were viewing it through purely human eyes. The financial pressure that used to generate panic now somehow generates creative solutions, unexpected opportunities, ideas you never would have thought of when operating from fear and control. This is living from divine consciousness rather than human consciousness alone. The external circumstances may shift gradually or they may shift dramatically. But what always shifts first is how you experience those circumstances. You gain access to a quality of peace, wisdom, and creative problem-solving that simply wasn't available when you were operating purely from human resources. Comment: my perception is shifting if you're beginning to see your challenges through different eyes than you did even a week ago. But here's where many people stumble on this journey, and I want to be completely honest with you about what to expect. There's a tendency to want instant results, to expect that once you understand this truth about the virgin birth happening within you, everything should transform immediately. You practice receptivity for a few days, maybe a week, and when dramatic miracles don't materialize instantly, you conclude either that the teaching doesn't work or that you're somehow doing it wrong. The nativity story itself corrects this misconception. Mary's divine conception happened in a single moment of grace when she said yes to what the angel announced. But her pregnancy still required 9 months. The birth couldn't be rushed. The gestation period was necessary for what had been conceived to fully develop and become visible. This same pattern governs your spiritual transformation. When you enter genuine spiritual receptivity and release human control, something real occurs in your consciousness in that very moment. Divine awareness begins conceiving itself within you, but its full manifestation, its visible effects in your life and circumstances, unfolds gradually over weeks and months. This new awareness needs time to grow, to strengthen, to mature before it can fully express itself through your decisions, your relationships, your work, your entire approach to living. The process requires patience that our instant gratification culture hasn't trained us to have. You might practice morning receptivity and feel peaceful, then by afternoon, find yourself caught in the same old patterns of anxiety and control. This doesn't mean nothing happened. It means you're in gestation. The Christ consciousness that was conceived is still developing, still growing stronger, still learning to express itself through your particular human personality and circumstances. What makes this journey sustainable is understanding that divine conception doesn't compartmentalize. Once Christ consciousness begins establishing itself in your awareness, it doesn't just improve your meditation practice while leaving the rest of your life untouched. It seeks to inform and transform every aspect of your human experience. Your business decisions, your health challenges, your relationships, your financial strategies. Every single area where you previously operated purely from human reasoning. This holistic transformation is what distinguishes genuine spiritual awakening from mere religious activity. You're not just getting better at spiritual practices, while remaining the same stressed, anxious, controlling person in your professional life. Divine intelligence begins flowing through all your responsibilities, both personal and professional. That business strategy you're developing, that difficult conversation you need to have, that health decision facing you, that financial pressure requiring response, Christ consciousness wants access to all of it. The impact of this integrated approach cannot be overstated. You stop living a divided life, where Sunday spirituality has nothing to do with Monday reality. Instead, the same divine awareness that guides your prayer time begins informing your work meetings, your parenting decisions, your financial planning, your response to unexpected challenges. You become a unified being, operating from divine intelligence in every sphere, rather than compartmentalizing God into designated religious moments. This is what it means for Christ to truly be born in you, rather than just believed by you. It's not an add-on to your existing life. It's a fundamental transformation of how you navigate everything. Drop "Divine Intelligence Guides All" in the comments if you're ready for this kind of holistic transformation across every area of your life. So if you've made it this far with me, I want you to know something. You're not here by accident. The fact that you stayed through this entire exploration of what the virgin birth truly means tells me you're genuinely seeking transformation, not just religious information. And that matters more than you might realize. If this content resonated with you, if it opened something in your understanding that wasn't there before, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. I share these deeper spiritual truths regularly, and there's a community forming here of people who are done with surface-level religion and ready for actual transformation. You belong in that conversation. And listen, leave me a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you recognize that this teaching found you at exactly the right moment in your journey. I read these comments, and there's something powerful about declaring your readiness for what wants to be born in your consciousness. The like button might seem like a small thing, but it genuinely helps this message reach others who are searching for what you just discovered. Someone out there needs to hear that the virgin birth isn't just ancient history, it's their personal invitation to transformation. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how divine consciousness practically transforms your daily life once it's been conceived within you. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've explored today is just the beginning of what becomes possible when Christ is truly born in you.